Looking around here, we have a quorum. Our first order is to make an adoption of the meeting agenda. We have a few changes today to the agenda. Item C, 6C3 is being removed from the consent calendar and moved down to 10E. Item 10C, which is the Bartlett Tree Experts, is being removed from discussion today. There's still some other background information we're working on. Item 11A, we're going to move to the January 2015 agenda. And one other change on 9B, Tony Blackwood was going to be discussing the LRP OVA work summary session. They're not prepared for that today, so we're substituting an update on the focus group summary. So, I need a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as just amended. Moved by Mr. Giddings and seconded by Mr. Hess. All in favor? Passed unanimous. I love old technology. Announcements, a number of things going on. First of all, I'll tell you, we just came from an extended executive session, and the board adopted our new plan for moving ahead with the office, and we're going to be working out negotiations and a contract with Brad Benson over his building over here to the left on the other side of the maintenance things, in other words, behind the bank, and you'll be hearing more about that as it comes along. We looked at, just very briefly, we looked at all of our options and looked at the costs and the benefits, and they came out far and above everybody for the best avenue approach. The West Rec project is coming along very well. It's a complex project, and it's sort of, at this point, split into two parts. Well, it always really was, but all of the inside work and the outside work. It just as well we did it that way, because the outside work entails putting stucco and a new rain and moisture handling system on the outside of the building, and that can't be done while it's raining. And the inside of the building is moving along very well. You're going to really love it when it's finished. So hopefully this will all come into fruition here in the first quarter of this next year, and we'll be back online and ready to run again. Another matter that you all probably know about by now, if you read the Oakmont newsletter or newspaper that comes out announcing right on the front page that Mark, our maintenance manager, was leaving. I'm happy to tell you that he's changed his mind. He looked at, yes, he's staying with us. We're very pleased about that. But I can summarize for him. He can hit me later. But the bottom line is he was happy here, but he got an offer from another company to do what he used to do, and he was flattered and excited. But then over the next day, it occurred to him that this was going to have an impact on a lot of other areas of his life. So when he looked at what turned out to be quality of life, he decided the quality of his life was best if he stayed right here with us. So we're appreciative of that. I guess we're coming up to the open forum. You knew that, it's right here. No, that was it. Oh, I see that. Sometimes I'm dyslexic, and I put line 3 after line 2 or something. Anyway, let's back up here into our traditional way and have our open forum. So anyone has something to say, you're welcome to take the microphone. We explain the lights here. You have 3 minutes, and we have a green light when you start, and 30 seconds before we want you to wrap it up. You'll get a yellow one, and when the red one starts flashing, the hook will come out and you get jerked off the stage. So, does anyone have anything to say at this point on our open forum? Oh,
You can't all be happy.
I'd like our secretary to note this is probably a first. We're all mellow fellows and ladies, right? Okay, now we did the announcements because I got it out of order. Actions taken outside of the board, there were a couple things that came up. As you all know, within the next month or so, we're going to be wrapping up our change out here with the electrical distribution system. The old transformer is going away. PG&E is coming in. We have all of our equipment ready to be placed and the underground work done. At that point, an inspector from PG&E will come out and look at it, and if done properly, and we know it will be, that project will move ahead. We want to get it all wrapped up in one day. We decided, for a number of reasons that worked out to our advantage, to wait till after the holidays. Now, as we always, all of us know, projects go perfectly and never have problems, right? Wrong. We didn't want to have any problems right in the middle of a holiday season, so this shift worked out to our advantage. But in addition to that, as originally planned, is that in the pool equipment area here for the central pool, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but many years ago, the timers and the controls and all those things were in the same room with all the chemicals, and with that corrosive atmosphere started, and moisture started having its effect on our equipment. And meanwhile, since that was first built, the codes have changed. So we're in the process of building a fire-resistant wall in there, moving all the electrical equipment into its own specific area. It will meet code to be safer, and it'll all be brought up to date. There was a bill for that. It includes transferring some power over from the CAC, and I think it came in around $4,700, something to that effect. Something we have to do, and the timing was such that I went ahead and authorized that expenditure so that we get that whole project done at once and done properly. So before I go further, I'd like to get a vote on the board to ratify that decision. We have a motion by Alan Scott, seconded by Andy Altman, to ratify that decision. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously. And the second item there was, let's see, let me go back a second. With the West Rec, looking at the control of the lighting and all of the other heating and air conditioning such at that building. In the past, it's all been on timers, and we had to remember to go back and reset them at different times of the year. There was no way to handle days that were especially dark and this and that. So it made sense to go ahead and automate that building the same way as we've done with the others, so that that can be all controlled remotely and kept up to meet our needs on a daily basis. And so I authorized the additional money to do that, and so they were on site, and that was the time to do it. We didn't want to wait another month to make that decision, so that was done. I'm trying to remember what the dollar value was on that. Pardon me? $4,300. So that's authorized. I'd like to have that ratified also, if we might at this time. You move? So moved by Andy Altman, seconded by Bob Giddings. All in favor? Opposed? Passed unanimously. Okay, I need a motion to accept and pass the consent calendar as modified when we started the meeting. Moved by Herman Hess, seconded by Bob Giddings to accept the consent calendar. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Yeah, it takes us down to our treasurer's report. Mr. Chanel.
Hey, for the month of November, we had revenue of $169,000 with expenses of $177,000, leaving us a deficit for the month of $8,000. On a year-to-date basis, revenue of $1,890,000, which was 0.5% better or worse than budget. Expenses of $1,824,000, which is 4% better than budget, leaving us a surplus for the first 11 months of $67,000. The transfers from the funds were all equal to budget. I believe the last house was sold in the orchard, so we collected this year $159,000 from the developer. Cash in the various accounts: operating fund $461,000, asset replacement $927,000, capital improvement $1,153,000, catastrophe $110,000, for a total cash balance of $2,651,000. Any questions? Will you guys and ladies accept the report?
We have a motion to accept Chuck's report, made by Andy Altman, seconded by Herm Hess. All in favor? Opposed? Passed unanimously. Moves us on to the manager's report. Mrs. Turner.
I have nothing to add to the manager's report. It's included in your packet, and I wish everyone a happy holiday.
Do I hear a motion to accept the happy holiday?
I have a comment.
Please, sir, your comment.
Whoever decorated the Christmas tree has done a fantastic job.
Well, thank you, Herb. That was a plug.
There it is. Beautiful. It really is. Okay. We have additional reports beyond this, and Sue Millar is going to be talking to us about the OCDC and the status update.
Is this on?
Yes. You're on, yeah?
Well, the OCDC meeting last Thursday was devoted mostly to our guests, who were Susan Gorin and Dick Fogg, who is a planning commissioner, county planning commissioner. One thing that I learned is that every supervisor gets to appoint 2 people, and each of them can serve on either of 2 boards: Planning Commission Board for the county, or the BAZ, which is the Board of Zoning Adjustments. That way, each of them can take a vacation and the other can fill in, and so they always have somebody representing the first district. So most of our questions were aimed at the wine industry in Sonoma County, and also the signage problem down at Kenwood. I think that the thing that we heard was that there is not enough code enforcement people to take care of what is an illegality going on down in Kenwood and other places where sandwich boards are at the side of the road, and the banners and so forth. Those are illegal, but it's very hard to get it changed because it's not high on the priority list. And as Susan said, there are other things that are more pressing. However, the Board of Supervisors might react to a letter campaign or email campaign. If they get enough complaints about something, they do sometimes act. From Oakmont's perspective, our worry is about the traffic on Highway 12, and I'm sure you've all been affected by that. Right now, my guess is that Caltrans is sort of fiddling around with the settings on the lights because they have other lights put in. You've seen as you go down, they're putting in left-hand turn lanes. Also, there's a light now active at Madrone. And I did say in our last meeting, we are definitely going to have a four-way intersection at Oakmont Drive that is going to be going in this spring, and that will give access to the winery properties across the street. And there are 3 wineries there that now have permits for events. Although, I am going to check on that a little further. It's very hard to keep abreast of this. There's been 2 permits that were given long ago and were not activated, so there's no winery, so you don't realize that. But anyway, we are going to get a 4-way intersection. If anyone at Oakmont is concerned about the signage at Kenwood, a note from you to the Board of Supervisors could do a lot more good, I think, than Oakmont just sending the letter from our board saying, hey, stop that, because they don't have anybody to make them stop it. I'm also getting a good feeling that I don't know how much of our efforts will have any influence on the wine industry in Sonoma County. That's what it is. It's an ag county, and that's what we've got. And we all appreciate the beautiful vines, but the downside is there's a lot of tasting rooms right now. As someone told me, we have 19 bars in Kenwood, and that's kind of what the tasting rooms are, but, you know, and there's quite a few of them. But anyway, we will keep track of all these things. Most of the other issues that we have been dealing with are quiet right now, and nothing new about Mr. Ledson's project. Everyone knows that El Noca is going to happen. They've submitted their plans to the city of Santa Rosa. And I guess a lot of people have been through the new homes over there at the Meadow. And so you know that that's active and will be completed probably within this next year. Do you have any questions? Any special things you want to know about, John?
Yeah, one of the things we discussed before was whether Caltrans was going to go back after they finished all this road work and retime the lights. At one time they worked great, now they're terrible.
Right, and I think I did kind of refer to that. I think that they will, because everybody has noticed that. But they do have to put in another light at El Noca, and they put the one in Madrone, and they've got other lanes, and they're putting in an intersection here at Oakmont. So I think they're just sort of testing out a few things. Yeah, I think there will definitely have to be a retiming.
Thank you.
Okay.
Susan,
Yeah.
with regard to the signage, Kenwood,
Yes.
I know that Kenwood Press had an article recently about some of the signage. Do you know if Valley of the Moon Alliance has also taken it up?
Oh, yes. That's one of their principal issues right now. And I have not only been in contact with Kathy Pons, who is the president of VOTMA, that is CAP, VOTMA.org, if you want to go on their website. And they are definitely trying to do something about the signs. Apparently, Caltrans did get kind of annoyed, and they finally sent a citation to one of the tasting rooms, which tasting room, I think, turned around a couple weeks later and put signs back out. I mean, they just sort of know that they have to keep up with the Joneses. You know, that's the problem. It's that if one person puts a flag in a sandwich board, then the next, if only they would get together. I think this is the only solution, is to have the vintners themselves get together and self-police and set up a little more elegant policy, because it's actually looking like, you know, a keg party down there instead of the elegant, sophisticated people that want to drop by and have a sip of wine. If they did some self-policing, I think that would be the most effective thing, and maybe we'll get around to that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I know right now you expect that we're going to go on to Tony, but we're not going to go on to Tony. We're going to go back and fix one of my mistakes. Under 4B, I skipped over the executive meeting minute summary by Frank Batchelor.
The executive committee met on an issue of past due assessments and on some violations of architectural guidelines, all of which are confidential, and I can't tell you anything about them, but we dealt with it.
Thank you. Back on track here again for the moment. Tony, you're up.
Thank you. My name is Tony Lockowitz. I'm the chairman of the Long Range Planning Committee here in Oakmont. And what I'd like to do is just give you an update on the progress of our focus group meetings that we had completed over the last week or so. The Long Range Planning Committee, through its research subcommittee, has actually just completed 8 focus groups conducted over a period of 8 days. They're very successful. We're still sifting through the results, but I just wanted to give you an update on what we did and why we did it and what we're going to do with it. First of all, the focus groups were moderated by a professional that was hired by OVA. Her name is Francesca Johnson. She has extensive experience in conducting focus groups and working with various committees, public and private organizations. So she brought a lot of background and knowledge to the table. We wanted to get it right. We didn't want to spend a lot of time and get information that would be questionable after all was said and done. But I think she did a very good job. The focus groups that we just completed were actually part of a 4-pronged effort by the Long Range Planning Committee, which included listening sessions. We had those right here in this room in August and September, where we all listened to what people had to say. The focus groups were just completed. We are going to be, and are just about started, stakeholder interviews, which are one-on-one interviews with key people here in Oakmont and outside of Oakmont, like politicians and city and county officials. And finally, the 4th part of our approach is to do an email survey in February. However, as far as the focus groups were concerned, the purpose of that whole exercise is to identify key issues for future planning and to help formulate the questions that we use in the survey. We don't want to just send out a survey that asks questions that you already know the answer or that are confusing and don't give you the results that we're looking for. So as far as our focus group experience is concerned, we advertised in the newspaper and elsewhere to recruit volunteers, and Oakmont resident volunteers. We were looking for a wide range of demographics: old, young, male, female, married, single, recent arrivals, people who have been here for a number of years. We needed approximately 10 participants for 8 groups, or 80 people. We got 180 people who responded and wanted to participate in the focus groups. So not everyone could be chosen. The participants were chosen at random by our consultant, Frankie Johnson, based on demographics. So if you put in an application and you were not chosen, don't blame me. It was done entirely at random. Frankie Johnson didn't know any of the names of the people involved, and the participants' confidentiality will be protected. Everyone was referred to by their first name. The focus groups looked at and asked for responses from the participants on 5 general themes. Number 1, why did you choose Oakmont as a place to live? What was it that you liked about Oakmont? Number 2, what main projects, initiatives, or amenities do you want the board to pursue for the future? 3, what are the main challenges facing Oakmont at this time and for the next 5 to 10 years? Number 4, what does the future of Oakmont look like to you? Is it a place that's going to be better in the future, worse, or about the same? And finally, the last theme was just a discussion about financing future projects or initiatives. Were people willing to finance all of the things on their wish list and all the improvements that they thought we should be making? I can report that the participants were uniformly enthusiastic, and every participant contributed substantially to the discussions. The focus groups were an outstanding success, and everyone that I've talked to who was involved in it came back with a very positive and optimistic feeling. A preliminary report will be due later this week. We have a research subcommittee meeting on Friday. I have not personally seen any results from focus groups. So we'll look at this at the committee level on Friday. We'll analyze it, and at some point, the actual release of the report will be made, not only a written summary report, but also the recordings, transcripts, and emails that were involved. I can't tell you when, I can't tell you to what degree of detail they will go. Again, this is a professionally run or professionally guided effort, and we don't want certain things to be publicized prior to our survey that might skew or influence people's answers and responses to the survey. But rest assured, we will be releasing the results of all of the activities that we're doing at some point. We hope to have them written about in the Oakmont News, put up online, and for those of you who want to read transcripts, we'll make every effort to make that available to you as well. So at this point, I want to thank the OVA board here primarily for funding the research groups to pay for Ms. Johnson's participation. The Long Range Planning Committee, our steering committee, and of course the consultant that we're working with. Most of all, I want to thank you to the Oakmont residents who participated in the focus group and made it all what I think is going to be a very successful endeavor. Thank you. That's all I have to say. If there are questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Well, that's good. That means we did everything right. Of course, you haven't seen the results yet, so I can't say that.
Thank you, Tony, on behalf of the board and all of us. Great thanks for the work you're doing and all the fine work that's coming out. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
On behalf of the committee and all the participants, thank you for your thank you.
It brings us on to new business and another important subject. Our OEPC recommendations on the revision of the charter of the membership. Turn it over to Frank Batchelor, and Frank, you give them a little background so everybody knows where we're coming from, and you got the floor, sir.
I think I'll speak up here. This is such an important issue. I'm sure everyone here recalls that perhaps maybe 3 to 4 weeks ago, a conversation occurred with our OVA attorney, with certain members of the board, and I think with our manager too, where it was brought to our attention that there were some very major liability issues that possibly related to the Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee, which I'll refer to as the OEPC. And after that conversation with the attorney, John Felton issued an order that they should cease all activities until further notice. At that point, a lot of people were upset for one thing, which is natural, because that OEPC has been in existence a long time, and it's done a great job, and there are a number of people on that committee who deserve a lot of praise for what they've done. However, we formed an informal committee. We didn't have time to get an actual ad hoc committee. I was on the committee along with Andy Altman, Bob Giddings. We had 3 members from the OEPC, Pat Barclay, the chairman, Mike Noble, and Jim Ouimet, all from the OEPC. What we first did is we determined what the issues were. Under the present setup of the OEPC, there were questions of whether certain activities were occurring within that committee, which exposes big liability, and whether we had insurance if we were exposed to liability and got nailed for it. So there are 2 issues here, liability and insurance. We identified 3 major problems with the present setup of the OEPC. The biggest was the fact that OEPC was acting as the umbrella for all the neighborhood COPE organizations in Oakmont. There are huge groups within Oakmont, neighborhood groups, who have organized themselves to go out and help their neighbors in an emergency. If we have a big catastrophe, say like an earthquake or a big fire, they are going to go around their neighborhoods, check on people. They can't get responses, they'll go and try to get into their house to help them, and they'll do everything they can to help people during an emergency. And that's all very good, and it's going to continue. But unfortunately, it cannot continue as presently set up under the OEPC, that is the Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee. Here's the problem. We have, first of all, liability. The individuals who help people during an emergency are forgiven any negligent acts that they commit, as long as it's not gross negligence. If they go to help somebody during the emergency, they are protected by what's called the Good Samaritan Act. Okay? So even if they just mess it up totally, they can't get sued, they're not liable, and they're okay. So the individuals who are doing these things out there are fine. But that Good Samaritan Act does not apply to corporations, does not apply to entities, such as the Oakmont Village Association. So if these COPE individuals are working under an umbrella of OVA, under the Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee, any act committed negligently by these individuals would be also the responsibility of OVA. We, the OVA, would then be subject to being sued for those acts committed negligently by those individuals, even though the individuals are protected. So there's huge liability when you're talking about things like earthquake and big fires. A person could walk into a house during an earthquake to check on someone. It might be dark, it might be at night. They might light a match to see something. Gas is on, building blows up. Guess who's going to get sued? OVA is going to get sued. Not the individual who tried to help, but we would be sued. Now, that's just one problem, is the liability. The other problem is that we don't have any insurance for it. Okay? We have what's called a commercial liability policy. And the commercial liability policy only covers us for acts of negligence that occur from the use, maintenance, or operation of our facilities. So we're talking about Burger Center, we're talking about swimming pools, we're talking about the fitness center. Any acts that OVA commits that are negligent within these buildings, we have coverage for our negligence. And we have a nice big policy in case we are sued. Also, attorneys will defend us, okay? However, we don't have coverage that goes out into the community. We're not covered for acts of negligence by volunteers going out into homes to try to help people. And we would basically have no coverage. We can get individual policies for certain activities to cover us for certain activities that might occur in the community at certain times, certain events that we might have. But to cover the whole community per se with an insurance policy would be probably very prohibitive. We're still going to check into it. we'll see if there's something we can come up with. But right now, our commercial liability policy does not protect us under those circumstances. Now, again, I emphasize, we're not recommending that COPE be eliminated, COPE Neighborhood Association. They can do their whole thing. This issue is not just Oakland's issues. We checked with Santa Rosa, or I say Pat Barkley checked with Santa Rosa, to see whether we could have the COPE organizations operate under the umbrella of Santa Rosa, the city. They had districts. I think ours is the fire district over here. The COPE's going to operate perhaps under them. So we checked to see if we could switch them under that umbrella. Well, guess what? Santa Rosa has just suspended their emergency program because of the liability issue. And they are in the process of instructing their people what they can do and what they can't do and that sort of thing. So the city of Santa Rosa was facing the same situation that we found out on our own. A couple of other things that were a problem as far as the Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee. We have a medical officer who's going to be here in Berger to basically help with medical aid. If someone was injured, they might be brought from their home here, and we'd have a medical officer here. We don't have any insurance for that. You basically have to have a medical malpractice policy. It's not covered under the commercial liability policy. So we have to get rid of the medical officer. The third issue had to do with security. We had a very nice group of people who were, I'd say, involved in law enforcement, who have volunteered. Hey, if we have a big earthquake or a big emergency, we'll go out and check on the community to make sure criminal activities aren't occurring and all that. Again, we're not covered for that. We only are covered for activities that occur from the use, maintenance, or operation of our facility. We're not covered out in the community. So that was another big exposure to liability. So those are the main three issues we identified. After the committee identified the liability issues and the insurance problems, we then had a phone conference with our attorney again. Pat Barkley had prepared a proposed charter. We went over the charter with the attorney. The attorney agreed with us. Yes, you can't be the umbrella for COPE. Yes, you can't have a medical officer. And yes, you cannot have a security officer. We then contacted the insurance broker to find out coverage. She agreed with everything I've just related to you, that we are not covered for volunteers going out into homes and helping people. It just isn't in the policy. So, from that, basically, Pat Barkley prepared a new charter, and I'd like to ask Pat Barkley to step up here and tell us what he's come up with. And then we'll take questions if you have any.
I really wasn't prepared to talk, but now that I'm up here. One of the goals I'd set when the liability issue came down was to figure out how we could, basically we as the OEPC were turned off. We were suspended, we were not allowed to do any activities at all. To me, it's important to our community that those activities got turned on as rapidly as possible. So as was just discussed, we went through and determined the areas that we felt presented the least or minimal liability to the OVA or could be restructured to mitigate the risk and get them instantiated in a new charter that we could present to the board to get the OEPC turned back on again as quickly as possible. I think the 3 to 4 weeks you quoted is actually, it seems like 2 months out of our lives that we're not going to get back going through this effort. But the charter that we have now maintains radio communications, as both the ham communications and the zone communications, by taking COPE out from underneath the OEPC umbrella
and allow it to function as an OVA group and get recognized, it really should have no impact on the function of COPE. Because COPE itself was acting pretty much as an independent entity, even when it was a part of the OEPC. We are going to make, and this again, an advice of attorney, in the event of a disaster, we would make these facilities available for resident use, but resident use at your risk. We're not going to be staffed with medical people, as we have previously done, that being a large liability issue. And not having it in front of me, I can't remember if there was another one in there. It's possible there was one other element of the OEPC. Oh, the educational aspect of OEPC, which has been a huge part of OEPC for the last 31 years, in terms of personal preparation, recommendations of things that you can do to... Oh, you were offering. You think I would have brought a copy of it? We have a fair amount of investment in supplies that were acquired, developed, and maintained to support emergency preparedness. We're going to continue to maintain protect those supplies. Because our hope is, this is the first step, and this is kind of a mantra that I have used. We've taken the first step in trying to get the OEPC back online and trying to get as much of the emergency preparedness activities back online. But we're not done. There's a number of liability issues that were cited. I am committed that we're going to continue the review process on the liability side to determine if there aren't things that we can't do. Perhaps there are elements of insurance coverage we could consider that would allow other elements of the OEPC that we have enjoyed in the past to get reinstated. It's not likely to be an overnight process, especially when we get attorneys involved in the process of reviewing liability issues. But I'm committed that we're going to push forward. This is first step. It may be an incremental process, and I fully expect to be presenting the board with additional charters for the OEPC and additional members of the OEPC as we can satisfy the OVA's concerns about the liability issues on what we do. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Well, how is COPE going to be reorganized? I'm a little confused about that.
Well, right now, we're all suspended. If this charter is adopted, the only change in the COPE structure is that instead of it having encapsulated under the OVA/OEPC umbrella, COPE can exist as an independent Oakmont group recognized by the OVA, because the OVA doesn't take any, there's no liability to the OVA for any of the other Oakmont groups. Right? You don't manage the group's activities, you don't approve their organizational structure, you don't supply the funding. So they would function perfectly as is, as a group recognized by the OVA, as opposed to being under the OVA umbrella. So that's really the only organizational change we're talking about. Yes? Yes, as a matter of fact, the role of the zone communicator is to interact with Oakmont residents to accept reports of, say, damage in the neighborhood or requests for assistance, and then relay that up to the radio network that's managed by the HAMs, where we can request outside assistance. The zone communicators are perfectly free to do that same job. In the past, we've had maybe a bit more of a relationship between the COPE team leaders and the zone communicators. As a COPE team leader is a resident just like any other resident, and they're more than welcome to talk to a zone communicator. So there's really functionally no change there, except this close relationship that was developing between the leaders and the zone communicators is something that we can't sustain because that removes it from the umbrella. Yes, ham operators will be at all 3 centers, just as they have been in the past. Same with the zone communicator stations and the people out in the field, absolutely.
Have you reached out to other HOAs to see how they handle this problem? Is everyone facing the same thing, somebody has some case law or something?
Well, 2 things that I discovered. One of them, there's Rossmore, and thanks to Ken Cronin, we got a copy of their emergency response plan. And they have something similar to what we do in terms of COPE. They don't call it that. They call it looking out for my house, or I'm not sure what it is. But the way they have it set up is the way that the city is backing up. COPE in the city is not going away. What I was told by the emergency services director for the city was that COPE had extended beyond its charter and taken it into areas that presented a liability to the city. And what they were doing was reining COPE back. And while they were not actively promoting it, their charter for COPE at the city level is simply providing information. They take no responsibility for the activities in the neighborhood. They provide information. They'll even bring speakers out. They don't manage the activity. They're strictly an information source, and it's up to the neighborhood school. So that's where they are headed. They had evolved to something well beyond that, including managerial structure at the district level and other levels.
Pat,
Yes.
I have a concern for the COPE volunteer, and is he or she adequately protected in your liability insurance at this time as we speak?
Well, COPE volunteers, and this is something we looked at for all of our OAPC people. The individual who may be doing a welfare check or assisting someone out of their house is covered under California's Good Samaritan law. And that's actually been tested in court and upheld. So this is the individual taking direct action. And as was said, that does not protect the organization if that individual was part of an organization that sanctioned their activity. And that's where we ran into the issue with liability. But COPE team leaders themselves, for example, or individuals in neighborhoods lending direct assistance to people are covered under the California Good Samaritan law.
Okay, thank you.
Yes?
So if there's not going to be any professional medical people at the recreation centers, are you going to have volunteers there doing first aid?
That was the problem.
Pat, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question here is if we're not going to have medical professionals at the centers, are we going to have volunteers doing first aid? Basically, what we have now are volunteers doing first aid. If you look at the recreational centers, the majority of the people that we're lending assistance do not hold active licenses. And there's a reason they don't, because they have to pay for malpractice insurance. And the malpractice insurance is really the issue. So whether it was a retired medical professional or another volunteer performing a medical-related activity without malpractice insurance, which the OVA is not going to carry, it opens a liability issue. So
It can also be a liability issue if somebody needs help and nobody gives it to them.
no, actually it's not.
Somebody's bleeding, somebody's not.
No, unfortunately that's not the case. The liability goes the other way. Yes?
In another community, I was involved in a CERT team, Community Emergency Response. Is that the equivalent of COPE or?
No, actually.
Can we
so the question
repeat
is,
the question again, please?
The question is there are some communities that use something called CERT. And is CERT like COPE? And CERT is not. CERT is actually an acronym that stands for Community Emergency Response Team. And it falls under the umbrella typically of the fire department as a part of their emergency management services, and is an extensive training activity which results in you actually have a card certified as a CERT person, and a CERT person means that they're qualified as a true first responder in the event of a disaster. It's a much greater emphasis in training. In fact, right now, I've been looking into how we could offer CERT training here for people that might be interested. It's a bit problematic. Napa and Marin are very active in terms of their CERT programs. Sonoma County is not. And from what I've been able to tell, the only fire department that even had a CERT program was in Sebastopol. And so trying to find a place where we could get the training involved where we would have CERT qualified people. And that's one area I'm exploring, because that gives a whole new twist to potential liability issues, because there may be another umbrella associated with it, since CERT is following down through the fire department emergency services. So yeah, I'm looking at it, but CERT and COPE are not the same things. Any other questions?
Pat, I'd like to pick it up at this point and see what we can do to move forward quickly. I've been a radio hand, amateur radio operator, for more than 50 years myself, and I came out of experience in fire department and emergency medical services. I understand all those kinds of things. What we're up against here, the bottom line is, this is my own opinion, that our elected folks in Sacramento, where they deal with a lot of stuff, haven't dealt with this well at all. I think there ought to be legislation introduced that allows communities like ours to develop our own procedures and methods, and so that we can take care of ourselves without incurring all these risks. So you might think about writing to your senator, congressman, assemblyman, whatever it might be, and say, would you take a look at this? There's a problem here. Now, for us right here, I got to say that the day a few weeks ago when I had to sit down and state that we weren't going to respond, it was very painful to me, as well as others. The responsibility fell upon me as the president and chief operating officer of the Oklahoma Village Association. I didn't want to have to do that. It went against everything I believe in, and I knew it was going to cause a wave. But by the same token, we had our fiscal responsibilities. We had to look at and protect the community. So I was kind of pushed into a position I had to do it. At this point, I would like to ask a question of you and Frank. And this is what I would suggest, and of course, it's up to the board and to Cassie and others. I would like to see at this meeting that we make a decision, and that decision would be to accept your charter, new charter, which has been vetted by our legal beagles, and the other areas that we've investigated. Accept your plan to split out the different responsibilities that are to mitigate the problem that we have. Accept that as it is today, knowing full well that it's a work in progress. But I'd like to be able to today, if we can, is to lift that restriction on our ability to respond based upon the work that's been done in the last few weeks. Do you see that as a possibility? Does it make sense? Or do we have to do more homework?
We can proceed now. We have the charter in front of us here. I can either read it to the public, if you'd like, and we can have a motion adopted, or how would you like to handle it?
If I could just interject one thing, and then I'll go sit down. I want to thank Frank and the committee. It was actually a lot of hard work, and it was done in a very short period of time. And I appreciate the committee taking my concern to try and get the OEPC reinstated as soon as possible, which took a lot of hard work in a very short period of time. And I think we should also acknowledge Cassie, I believe, who first identified the potential liability, which I'm undoubtedly you probably took a little heat for, but it was definitely in the best interest of every person that lives in Oakland, because if we had had a judgment against us, I'd hate to think what would happen to our monthly dues.
Well, you shouldn't have had to take any heat because the buck stops with me. I figured out who else to blame. Let's take a look at the situation. I think the first order of business would be perhaps a motion to accept the new charter as published. And then we'll move on from there. Do I hear?
They said they want to hear it. It wouldn't take long.
Okay, go ahead, please.
This has been vetted by both the insurance broker and the attorney. Okay. Committee charter, Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee. The Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee, OEPC, is a standing committee of the Oakmont Village Association. It serves both as an advisory group to the OVA Board of Directors and as a resource to Oakmont residents on emergency preparation. The committee's primary purposes are to provide informational materials to residents for self-help, personal emergency preparation based on publications issued by FEMA and other emergency service organizations, to attempt to assist the OVA in defining the scope and limitations of emergency preparation and response within Oakmont to shield the OVA from third-party liability. 3, attempt, but with no guarantees, to make OVA recreation centers available for resident use. 1, as temporary shelter, with the understanding that residents and their guests will be responsible for their own safety and well-being while occupying said centers. And 2, as possible staging areas for evacuations by Red Cross, Santa Rosa, and Sonoma County Emergency Services organizations. Next, protect but not be obligated to preserve OVA emergency-related assets, including replenishment of consumable supplies as required. Next, attempt, but with no guarantees, to maintain and operate radio networks to provide a communications capability during a disaster or emergency affecting Oakmont and/or Oakmont facilities, with the understanding that residents and their guests will still be responsible for their own safety and well-being. Stay abreast of current and emerging policies, procedures, and technologies in the areas of personal and community emergency preparation and response. And finally, establish and maintain interfaces with city, county, and other emergency agencies. The committee's mode of operations include open meetings on a regular monthly schedule with agenda prepared and announced in advance by the chair. The OVA facility manager will participate in committee meetings but will not vote. Subcommittee meetings as needed for special projects subcommittee meetings as needed for special projects to recommend solutions to identified needs or problems for committee review. Funding provided by the OVA in accordance with established financial policy.
Are there any questions about concerning what you just heard?
One of the things this charter does is allow the use of these facilities in case of an emergency. Does that then, but that doesn't hurt our liability coverage, or is that just, we're not guaranteeing anything? Is this the idea? If they use the facilities in an emergency,
They are responsible.
that doesn't,
That's what it's.
they're responsible, but are they?
Well, we recognize the situation. You have an earthquake. Well, this burger center could be damaged. We may not know the extent of the damage, okay? But, you know, it's a nice facility. There might be light here. There might be electricity. People might be water. A lot of people might be cut off from those type of facilities. We're saying we will try to keep it open, okay? But they're still going to be responsible for their own safety. It's like we'll do our best efforts, but we can't guarantee anything because we won't have somebody to check out the building right away, perhaps. You know, it's going to be a bad deal if it happens. So we're going to try to help as much as we can, but try to mitigate our liability as much as possible. But in any case, we have insurance. If it collapses, we're insured.
The existence of this property would still be covered under our insurance.
Correct.
Regardless of what people might be using it for.
Correct. But we're not covered out in the community.
I have a question, John. In the event of an emergency, where we would have people staged at the various recreation centers, are those recreational centers equipped with emergency power situations, like providing light and heating?
Yes, they are and there aren't. They are, we do have the capability, but we can't guarantee that it'll be operational or working properly, because that would be extending ourselves into a position where we'd be liable. But we do everything, we have the equipment, we do everything we can to help mitigate the circumstances, and that's as far as we can take it. I see Mark over there shaking his head no. Do you still disagree?
Would there be drills or operational checks to see that this equipment does in fact work under those conditions?
Yes, of course.
Thank you for welcoming me back.
That depends what you have to say right now. Right?
Okay. We don't have overall facility electrical capacity. We have small generators that are mainly to power the radios, the area radios for COPE or the ham radio operators to connect to the county emergency grid. So it's something we looked at earlier this year. There is quite a cost consideration, and we can bring it back if we want to look at taking that step and making our facilities ready for a large emergency. So when I was shaking my head, no, we have small lights that we can plug into the small generators we have, but for facility-wide, for heat, lights, we don't have that capacity at this time.
Yeah, what he's saying is if we have small generators, and if we plug the building into the generator to try to keep up the lights and the heats and everything else, it'd say, "What are you doing? I'm out of here." The only way to handle that, if would be a big change, would be to put in regularly, permanently installed generator systems in each one of our buildings. And we're talking about quite a bit of money and complexity. Does it mean we couldn't do it or shouldn't do it? I don't know. That's not the discussion today.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the revised charter of the OEPC as presented.
It's been moved by Bob here and seconded by somebody, Alan, to accept the new charter. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously. Now let's go on to the second issue. We've got that one out of the way. Cassie, do you have any reason that we should not at this point, based on that we've just accepted the new charter, if it's been vetted, to go ahead and implement those areas that are allowable? What was, I'm sorry? I think your answer was you would go ahead and do it, right?
Green lights on?
No objection.
Then I would further move that we remove the suspension of the OEPC as a OVA recognized committee.
Moved by Mr. Giddings and seconded by Alan Scott to lift the restriction and commence operations under the new rules. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Whew, well, that one, that's done. That's good work, guys and ladies.
Thank you.
All of you should be congratulated, Pat, for getting this done as fast as we can. Because this is something that the community has to have.
Because I haven't had a microphone, I haven't been able to talk all day, so I'm just going to right now.
Don't believe it.
Pat was a real ramrod on this and kept it moving very quickly. But I'll tell you, we have a gem in Frank Batchelor and what he brought to the table on this and the follow through on it and the explanation to not only the rest of the committee, but the board and members of the community that wrote in skeptical of some positions that were taken. So thank you, Frank, very much.
Excellent. Let's move along to our next item on the agenda, is the Oakmont Sunday Symposium revised bylaws. Who is prepared to speak on that?
They just submitted a bylaw revision, that's all, it's just for you to approve.
Okay.
I move that we accept the proposed bylaws.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the revised bylaws. All in favor? Whoops. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passed unanimous. Next item is our annual OVA insurance proposal. Cass?
We have our insurance currently, the master policy, through Brown & Brown Insurance Company. They're a large insurance company, and they insure more than just homeowners associations. So what I thought, last year I really didn't have the time to analyze the policies, but what occurred to me, because I've used only insurance brokers that specialize directly in homeowners insurance and coverage and nothing else, that I would like to go out to bid this year and bid it directly with Tim Klein Agency. So let's go over very briefly some of the finer points of the two master policy comparisons. The first one is the coverage limit amount. It's from Brown & Brown. It's from a major carrier, Philadelphia. The coverage is for $10,873.91. The Tim Klein Insurance Agency's coverage, because they bothered to go line by line in the reserve study, they are going in accordance with our reserve study prices, and their coverage is for $12,185.75. This has a blanket personal property coverage. It's included in the property limit, where the blanket personal property coverage in Brown & Brown is separated out, and that's only $1,311,200. The other specific concern that I had is the Brown & Brown has a co-insurance clause in their policy, which means that if we say the Burger building is worth $2 million and it costs $3 million to rebuild because of a fire, we would be responsible for that additional $1 million. So they're only responsible for what it is quoted at the time of the coverage. The Tim Klein Insurance Agency policy with Riverport would replace up to the actual cost of the building. So that's a significant difference in the policies. We were able to get automobile insurance. We were having a little bit difficulty because some of the people who were driving in the maintenance had some issues with their license, but we now have coverage for $906. The D&O coverage is extremely important. The Brown & Brown coverage is for $1 million, as is a Tim Klein insurance for $1 million. But the Brown & Brown policy is a claims-made policy. It means during the year the claim is made, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the act or damage was done during that year. And it has a limited defense, and it has a $10,000 deductible. The Tim Klein policy is for $1 million. It's through Liberty Mutual. This policy covers unlimited defense costs outside the policy limits, and it also includes non-monetary claims. A non-monetary claim would be an example of something, would be if someone sued because they didn't like the results of an annual meeting. So there's no specific monetary loss there, but they're suing because of something they didn't like, some policy the board did that they didn't appreciate. One of the other large areas of differences is the umbrella coverage. The umbrella coverage that Brown & Brown offers does not wrap around the D&O policy. So it is a $10 million policy with a $10,000 deductible. The Tim Klein policy, the umbrella is, there is no deductible, and the limit is 10 million, but the very important thing is the fact that this umbrella coverage wraps over the D&O coverage. So in other words, if you get sued for in excess of the D&O policy, this would fold into that. The earthquake coverage from Brown & Brown is subject to a $25,000 minimum occurrence. So in other words, if you're going to make any kind of a claim, it has a $25,000 deductible. Tim Klein offered two options. The first one, option one, has no deductible, but it also has 3 carriers, so it has 3 different layers of insurance for the earthquake. The second option has a $25,000 minimum per occurrence, just like the Brown & Brown, but it only has 1 carrier. That's the difference between them. So in summary, there's a lot of other differences, but I'm not going to bore you with the details. Is I basically found that the Tim Klein agency offered insurance that was less expensive. It's $113,000 and compared to Brown & Brown of $121,986, and it has higher rated companies, and it has broader coverage at a lesser cost. So it's up to you. What would you like to do?
I'd like to add something to that, Cassie. I think you understated the limit by $1 million on the property, and
Is that all?
I think it's 13 million eight, not 12 million eight. And I called Cassie the other day because comparing insurance quotes, especially quotes with this complexity, is always so much fun, and really only professionals should talk about it because we bore everybody else in the world. But it's a tradition, which we like to do at Christmas time. So don't thank us, it's our duty, it's a tradition. But, you know, I'd like to point out just for this, because we should talk about this as a community, that overall, dealing with Brown & Brown was more straightforward. Dealing with Klein, which I fully support, and I thank Cassie for finding that particular broker, that independent broker. But their coverages, their policy coverages, and the number of companies, it's more complex, and there's nothing wrong with that. For instance, the D&O, we would go through Brown & Brown, D&O, pardon me, not D&O, DIC, the earthquake cover. They would get 1 carrier, and of course, as Herm knows, that carrier would go to lay off some of that risk to reinsurers. With Klein, he's going to another broker, they call MGAs in Colorado, ITA, and he gets a subscription policy. I'm sorry, it's boring, but this gives you some idea of the complexity. And that specialty broker in Colorado goes to Lloyd's, it goes to National Fire, which is a division of Warren Buffett's firm, and QBE, I think that's out of London also. So it's more complex on the surface, but when you get down to it, probably the same number of insurers and reinsurers are involved on both sides, and it should not affect what we're most concerned about is when we have a claim and we want to pay. So the terms with Klein on deductibles, on total values insured, on coverage, and Cassie pointed out, I'd like to underline it, that the umbrella comes over the D&O cover for directors and officers. So that really gives us an effective $11 million limit as opposed to the $1 million limit we have now. So the object of boring you further at this traditional time is just to tell you we do think about these things, and certainly something as important as insurance we wouldn't leave to the manager alone, as competent as she is. But we have these talks, we try to challenge one another and come up with the best. And I just thought you guys should know that It's just not rubber stamped. And finally, it's a good idea to change brokers every once in a while. They get very complacent. So I think this is a good deal. And so I'm recommending it to the board also. I'd be happy to make a motion. That's a good idea. I'll make a motion.
I'll second the motion, and I've given Bob my proxy on this matter. I don't have any idea what's going on. I don't want to know.
I'd like to move that we accept the Tim Klein insurance quote as provided to the OVA that Cassie has a copy of for the calendar year 2015.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Giddings, seconded by Mr. Patzler, to accept the recommendation of our, how do you want to do that? What was your specific wording? Cassie's recommendation? Or the company itself? That we accept, use the, okay, accept the proposal in line. Any further discussion? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Okay, that takes us on to the, just a very simple word, but I might mess it up. The Sufi meditation application to become a group. Is there a Sufi here? Are you Sufis? I don't know what that is. It has something to do with meditation. Does anybody have a reason that we shouldn't accept it as a group? Go back into it. I'm ignorant on this.
The individual who wants to have this meditation group wants to do it in her home. The issue arises on insurance coverage. Most club activities, with some exceptions, like the hiking club, actually use facilities of Oakmont. And if something goes wrong in facilities, negligence is committed, generally we're covered by our liability insurance. I think the issue was, if we do approve this group, we have to make a point that OVA will not be responsible for any negligence that occurs within the home where these meditations are occurring. That's our primary purpose. I think I would like to address another issue involved with this, not necessarily with this particular group, but when I was one of the co-leaders for the hiking club, I was always concerned with, gee, do we have any insurance? And could never get a straight answer, particularly. Because I was always concerned, our activities in the hiking club would be in the mountains. Somebody would fall off a mountain, somebody might have been responsible for it, and somebody's going to be sued, maybe. And, you see things like we have recognized clubs here. In our publication policy for the Oakmont News, it says we will publish things for approved clubs. I think we need to tie down our definition of what these clubs are and also inform them that generally, except for the activities that occur within our facilities, they're not covered. And we can do this by, defining what a recognized club is. It might be approved for publication of articles in the Oakmont News so they can get the word out. But when we say approved, doesn't mean we approve of how they're conducting their business or, that we are endorsing them or something of that nature, because that's where it exposes us to liability. So I have no problem myself with this request that we recognize this meditation group, as long as we express to the person that if some negligence occurs in her home, she's the one that's going to be responsible under her policy, and we're not covering her.
I have a concern that would be setting a precedent. I don't mean to be funny here, but I would think meditation is pretty low contact, quiet kind of thing. But what if someone decided they're going to do boxing lessons at home? I realize that's kind of sounds outrageous, but I wanted to paint a contrast here. do we want to get into a situation where we make exceptions for a particular group and then later on live to regret that we'd set a precedent? Just a question I don't have the answer to.
Saying to the group, we're not covering you, will that stand? If somebody gets seriously injured at somebody's house, recognized club, will that stand?
It will not stand if you're actually doing something to control their activities and are endorsing their activities. No, it won't stand. An attorney will get by that. But the idea is to make it plain in writing exactly how far we're going when we're saying we're recognizing them as an Oakmont club. Okay? Recognizing them as an Oakmont club may only entitle them to put news in the Oakmont News. Doesn't entitle them to be under our umbrella. That's the idea.
Before you do this, have you thought about the many Oakmont clubs that meet in our buildings that hold meetings in their own homes? How is this going to affect that, and will it affect?
Again, they would not be covered in their homes. Okay? They're only covered in the facility. That's it. Well, I haven't seen the Klein policy. Under our current policy that we have, it says it only covers us for the operation, maintenance, and use of our facilities. The ownership, maintenance, and use of our facilities. It does not cover for activities in private homes.
Okay,
That's the same for the
I understand that.
plan.
Then why do you need a special dispensation for this group? If they want to meet in their homes instead of in a facility, they're plainly not covered.
No, I don't think we need a special dispensation. It's just that no one's really, I think, thought this through thoroughly, and that we can go ahead and say approve this group as a recognized group, but then I think we have to define exactly what we're talking about and publish it, so that people will know how far we're going when we say we recognize.
I think perhaps, just an idea that we should table this till our next general meeting. So give us a chance to find out from a legal point of view, and I know we keep going back to that, but it's important.
Okay. I was just handed...
Come up with an answer, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just handed Oakmont Village Association recognized groups. I tried to find this last week when I went into the OVA office, when I was unable to find it at that time, but it does have a provision here saying recognition does not convey endorsement or sponsorship of an organization by OVA. So we have it there. Perhaps we just need to modify our publication policy to remove the word approved and make it conform with the recognition definition that we have. And then I see no problem with this person having their meditation group in their own home.
I move that we accept the Sufi meditation group as an Oakmont group.
It's been moved by Alan Scott, seconded by Bob Giddings, to accept the request for this group. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Well, solved that one. Great. Passed unanimously. Brings us on to unfinished business. To questions of OVA projects. I think we've talked about quite a few of them. Just as an update, at the east, the lighting bollards and all that's been replaced. The building's been repainted. It looks great. I'm trying to think of any smaller little things that are going on. I think we covered most of them, but Cassie, I'm sure you'll have something to add.
One of the reasons I added this chart under new business is there's a couple of things that happened with the board this year that's noteworthy as far as projects. And one of them was most of you went on a walkthrough for all the facilities and you saw the projects and the repairs that needed to be done. So at some point, we prepared a list of items that needed to be looked at, repaired, and also maybe put on a list of things to do. What happened during the course of the year is some of those items went by the wayside and other items took precedent. So what I wanted the board to see on a graph was that these are the activities that are requesting money that might have not actually been on the board members' list of projects for this year. So one of them was the office relocation remodel. Now that you've given us the go-ahead to go forward and start negotiating a lease with Brad Benson, that's going to be on this chart. The community garden water was not on anybody's radar at the time of the board walkthrough, and that now has jumped to the top of the chart. The West Rec was on everybody's list, so that's just for your information. But what wasn't on the list was a West Rec pool and deck renovation, which is now going to be considered and is going to be part of probably the January workshop. The pickleball courts was on the list and moving towards submittal to the city, so that's on here. The central switchgear project is also included on here. What wasn't on anybody's radar was the lawn bowling plinth replacement and the shed replacement. That is now on the list, and it is scheduled for a January replacement. The Burger Gardens was never on anybody's list. It doesn't mean that the Landscape Improvement Committee wasn't working on it. It just wasn't included in part of the board's list. So that was submitted a month or two ago, and so that's on the list of possible items to approve. The Burger Center is looming. I don't think it's going to happen in maybe 2015, but it could. And so that's listed on here. And also the monument signs need to be replaced. So I just wanted the board to see how much you had in the operating account, how much you had in the CIF account, how much you had in the reserve account, and how much all these projects are going to cost, so you have some way to evaluate these projects when they come to you for approval or rejection.
Thank you. I want to clarify something. I thought you heard, but I wasn't sure about the completion or work starting on this building. Did you say 2015 it wouldn't start, or 2016?
I have no idea, but I didn't think, because they're just starting the investigation process now, and if they're really going to do a thorough remodel, look at how long it took the West Rec building to get online. So I didn't think that it might make the 2015 year.
May I ask a question to Dassie or John or anyone? What is this list? Is this a list that's published, that's available, written? I know I've never seen any such list. I come here and listen to John Felton update us on projects, and I take notes, but I've never seen a comprehensive list of active projects, either that are being considered or being actively worked on.
Here's the list.
Is it available?
Yeah, sure. And I never, because a lot of these are looming.
I know, they keep changing.
And they keep changing. I've never bothered to put it in a chart before, but now I have. And so the list is available.
Let me put it this way. This is a newborn list. It hasn't even come home yet. It's still in the nursery. That's why you haven't seen it. It's that new.
I didn't want to go to bed thinking that there was a list out there that I hadn't read.
No. It's not an unlisted list. Okay, let's move on at this point to the community garden water issue, which just floated to the surface. And it's a big deal, especially if you're a gardener. I could lead this off, or someone else want to lead off the discussion on this? I don't see a whole bunch of hands. Let me kind of give you a little bit of background. The community garden was built some years ago, and at that time, water for that garden was taken from a meter located along the side of the road that runs down to the water treatment plant. I think Brad Benson owned that area, and he gave us permission to use water from that meter, and we did. And of course, we paid for it, and it was a very good arrangement. There were downsides to it. There was a very small line. You can probably only water 1 or 2 plots at a time, and the water was transported above ground through garden hoses and such, so that they could freeze, and it's not a good situation. Well, not a good situation. It turned into a really bad situation. Brad is in the process of building a house there, and that water meter feeds the house, and the city says, you can't take any water, tap it off of there and send it anywhere else. It'll only be for your house. This happened like, whoa, we didn't know this was coming. And so right now, if it wasn't raining, the garden would have dried tomatoes. Pardon me? Fried? Well, it was hot, yes. Anyway, so now we got a problem on our hands. If we stay where we are, there's no water. And we have to get water. So if we stay where we are, the closest water meter or meters, or 2 of them, are across the street. So that means, and we'll get into the financial figures here in a moment, that we have to go to the city and get a permit and get a contractor to cut a trench right across Stonebridge, and put a pipe in it and fill it back up and pay all the fees and bring water, and then make a new water distribution system to the existing garden. Okay? Now, we're going to hear the numbers in a minute. It's going to make your hair on fire, because it's just like, it can't cost that much. It does. So what's the other alternative? Well, okay, if we can't move the water to the garden, why don't we move the garden to the water? Now, that's another interesting aspect. There is an area across the street that would accommodate a garden. In fact, it would accommodate a larger garden. It already has the water there. But then there are some fees to tie into that existing water system, but they're very minor. But then there's other costs. In all fairness, if we move the garden across the street, we want to do it right, and that would mean that we don't just put a fence around a pile of rocks and say, okay, fix this up so it works. That's sort of what we did last time. We did a little bit of work, but a tremendous amount of time, energy, and money went into developing the present garden, so it was suitable. Some people put in raised beds, others didn't. Anyway, that's where we are today. So the other question is, okay, what is the cost of building a new, larger garden across the street and tying into the water there, compared to the very high cost of putting a line under the street going to the other side? So there's a brief summary of where we are today. I don't think I missed anything of great importance, but I think now we've got to start talking numbers.
Have you, the update that I got from Mark, you still here? Yeah. Okay. That it was kind of an interesting dollar figure, because it was going to cost about $30,000 either way.
Yeah, that's correct. For permit, get just the water meter in the ground to behind the sidewalk, it's about $30,000. That's fees from the city, permits, costs to actually cut the street open, have a contractor come in to the meter. To expand the garden for what the garden club has requested is about $13,700. With John Felton's direction and talking to Cassie how we could move what space we had to move the garden. Current space that we have with the expansion would be about 10,000 square feet. The new one across the street which would be just west of the large oak tree between the culvert and the hedgerow next to the houses that are there, would be about 16,000 square feet. And we would actually turn that into a facility, an OVA facility. We would amend the soil, we would put the fence in, we would put the raised beds in to give gardeners the opportunity to say, here you go. You can go ahead and plant your crops, irrigation and everything would be there. You won't have to spend your own money to go ahead and amend the soil, remove the rocks, build your own boxes like they did with the current one. That's a proposal that I'm working on now. I should have numbers, preliminary numbers, what that cost will be tomorrow at a meeting of Cassie and Cory.
Mark, I have two questions. One is, has the provisions for expenditure for this proposed garden change a part of our current budget?
It's just, no, I don't think it is. I think this is just something, when Brad Benson went to put his house in, speaking to a contact from the city water department, that we are not allowed, homeowners not allowed to have water cross a boundary, cross the property line. So that eliminated, once he started, that eliminated use of the water that he was supplying us. We don't have any facility or any meters on that side of the street, on the west side. On the east side of the street, there are 2 meters there because there were proposed building sites there. And when the city came in, they put the meters in. So we will tap off one of those for potentially a new garden area.
Are you saying then that Benson installing this new building will result in no water for the existing garden?
That's correct.
It's already happened.
It's
Already
that
happened.
yeah, that was about a week ago Monday that we got notice that no more water for the community garden at its current location.
I guess the other thing, I'm getting complaints from some of our residents with regard to this building that Benson's putting up. And it's considered to be an eyesore. And who has approved that building?
Allow me to address that. The city went, all the rules were followed. They went and they asked for the permits. The city went out, they notified everybody in the area, here's your chance to comment on it. There were no comments made. The permits were granted, everything was done by the book, and now is not the time to go back and say you don't like the way it looked. I'm sorry, but it's a done deal.
Is there any landscaping planned for around the building?
It's private property. It has nothing to do with Oakmont as far as what he does there. You know, he can paint it. He can paint it pink, purple with yellow polka dots, and cover it with spikes. You know, that's the way it is.
I understand it's Benson's property, but I've just asked a question. Do we know will there be some landscaping that will help hide the building?
I hate to say this, it's an irrelevant question, and we may like to see that, but it's not our property.
It was probably almost a year ago that Benson submitted plans to our architectural committee. He would never go to the city of Santa Rosa without doing that. So our architectural committee looked at his plans, and it is his property. And so now he has been before the city of Santa Rosa, and he's gotten approval. But I do believe there is some landscaping planned on the uphill side, because it really only affects the view of neighbors up on Meadow Ridge to a certain degree. It'll be down below the hill, and so there will be some planting around it.
I would like to hear from the, to go back to the original issue here, from the garden club, community garden people as to what their wishes are. I mean, I think preparing the soil is certainly, I don't know if that's something OVA needs to do. That's something that I think gardeners like to do themselves. But anyway.
Well, I mean, Sure, let me address that. When we're talking about amended soil, when the gardeners moved into that patch that they're in now, John was right. Basically, nothing was done. So we'd go through, we would rip the heavy stuff out, we would turn it into, again, an OVA facility where we'd have raised beds. We would put it in. If they wanted to add soil to the boxes, they would. But it would give everyone an equal share of a facility that we built for them. It would be, in my opinion, just like doing it at the West Rec or pickleball or bocce that we did earlier this year. So give them something they could.
Mark, have you done any research on the actual hillside there as far as rain runoff or wind or anything else compared to across the street? Have we looked at that, or is that something we should be asking the gardeners?
This is the proposal, because we are looking at dollars for dollars between water meter to existing and potential new site. What would be the best way to spend those dollars? Whatever they are, if it's $30,000, $40,000, how we go ahead and do that the best way.
I understand that, but if the new site requires some more structural work in order to make it a viable garden, we would need to know that those numbers up front as well, as like if retaining walls or some kind of wind screens or something were required.
Well, we wouldn't. It's relatively flat. It appears to be a little bit flatter than their existing location or their expansion that they have proposed. So we would use it basically as it is, and there is shrubbery on the uphill side. And if we wanted to, there is a pretty good drainage swale through there. If we wanted to recover water, there's a potential of doing that there. So, but wind screens or anything like that, we haven't gotten that far.
Could I add this from one board member's perspective? Really, the only thing I'm interested in is what the gardeners would like. We've heard that we have about equal costs on either side of the street, approximately, estimated anyway. And I think perhaps the board should, and Mark and your staff, put yourself in the position of enabling what these people want. And let's not get too far into what might be needed in the future, but what you want, your garden, where it is, or if you want it across the street, and we can help enable that, rather than us taking the lead. I'd like the garden club to take the lead, because they're going to be using it, and we want them to be happy. Just as if it was the lawn bowling, or any other outdoor function, we want that group to be happy. And if this whole thing cost $5,000, we would have approved it today, but it looks like $30,000, and that's why we're going slow.
Yeah, I'd like to point out.
I would like to hear from the garden people.
Well, hang on, before we do that, I just want to set the record straight here. There was no intention of leaving you out of this discussion. We just hadn't gotten there yet, okay? And Alan's trying to push that along, and I encourage that. But I felt that it was necessary to explain the history for everybody and for you, and to lay out some possibilities that we worked on, so at least we have a framework we can talk around. So, microphone's yours.
My name is Pat Olin. I am the interim president of the Oakmont Community Garden. And did someone say they couldn't hear? Is that better? Yeah. Okay. I'm still Pat Olin. I'm the interim president of the Oakmont Community Garden. And thank you for the opportunity to address this issue. And yes, it is one that we are very concerned about. And we're happy to be given the opportunity to have an input on the issue. We have some real problems with moving the garden across the street. And Mark, I want a clarification on one thing.
Speak into the mic, please.
I want clarification on one thing. You mentioned the new garden. You were talking about the oak tree. You said to the west of the oak tree.
Oh, sorry, to the east.
To the east, over next to the last house, basically.
Yeah, basically from the house to the tree would be your new, well, that would be the new garden.
All right. That's what I thought we were talking about.
Right.
All right. Let me say first we feel that best with this new proposal, and by the way, we are certainly not endorsing it, and certainly not at this time, if ever, but not at this time. But even in concern of the new proposal, we have some issues there. Because we would need a master gardener to really to assess that new location, especially in regard to wind and drainage. The hill on that side is steeper and longer than actually the one on our side, although that is primarily more over to the west of the oak tree. But there's also no shade at all on that level of the street. On the other side, we do have some trees there that give us some relief, in which there's a picnic table and some things there, which we utilize sometimes for meetings, and these gardeners will go over, of course, and take a few minutes rest, especially during the hot summer months. There's no such provisions on the other side. Also, and this is one that I think that a lot of the gardeners and a lot of the other residents will remember from a few years past, the new garden that is being proposed or discussed on the other side of the street would be closer to the homes on that side of the street that opposed the community garden in the first place. And they've monitored the garden club activities, noise, and looks since the inception. And we would be moving a garden closer to them, not away from them. Now, we've worked hard over the last few years to heal feelings and to watch and be careful about our activities so that we are not annoying them, so that we're not creating a noise hazard and bad looks, not flying flags and doing whatever that would be detrimental to their home enjoyment. And I can't imagine that they would be welcoming our garden right under their houses. Also in that regard, we would be moving a garden over next to another house that we've been talking about a lot of activity there that would have to be done to even get that garden ready to be gardened. And let alone, I can't imagine that those people would necessarily be happy with all of a sudden having a whole community garden right next to their property. And that's the last house, by the way, on the street there for quite some time now. We would like to see a full assessment of all the charges, the costs of a new garden, because we think that that would be quite a bit of money, including the grading, rock clearing, retaining walls, gates, fencing, including wall fencing, soil enrichments, bulletin boards, hose bibs, hose holders, water pipe size, water cutoff, individual retainer boards for each of the garden plots, everything that would basically come in also at once. What we also would like is a seat at the table for further discussion of this action and the viability of it. And we would like more than one seat at the table, because we would also like one of the seats to be that of a master gardener from our organization. And this is an important issue to the garden, and I think to Oakmont as a facility, because that has been one of the things that we've certainly had a lot of comments over the years of being one of the really pluses of Oakmont. People have come in and visited, have been the garden area. And it has, I think, been something that has drawn people even to Oakmont. And we want to be part of the solution and the discussion. And we obviously have to do something. We've got to address the issue straightforward. Fortunately, when time I came in as interim president, that was one issue that we immediately raised with the board because we could see the building going up. We're thinking, wait a minute, are we going to lose our water? And we didn't necessarily think we'd lose it as quick as we did, but now it's here and it's an issue that's got to be addressed. But in any discussions, and also, and in that we met with Mark and with Andy when she was assisting us on the bylaws issues and getting recognized. And the numbers that I'm seeing today are hugely different from the numbers that we were talking about. So I'm wondering if we could still look at the present garden and see if it can be done in an incremental process, because we know you guys do not have a lot of dollars laying around unused. And although ours, I think, is an exception, and I guess that we've also been such a cheap date for so many years, but we would like the consideration on that. And if you ask me what I would like today, because I think that we do have to give some consideration to the suggestion that we could move across the street. Not that I'm necessarily for that, nor do I think our garden community would be for that, but certainly it's due consideration, and we should give due consideration to it. And if you ask us, and I'm speaking, I think, now for Layla and Gail and Shirley here, what we would like to see probably formed is the task force, so that we can look at everything and go over the figures with Mark, because the figures that we were looking at before, and to see if also if this could be done in incremental basis, so that we do not have to put out an awful lot of money at one time. Like, I don't know how far we can go with this of the water meter. You know, how much can we take it across the street and then later fill it out, you know, do all the other work that we've talked about later and at least delay some of the cost?
May I ask a direct question?
Please do.
Generally, aside from the size of the garden presently, the garden club is happy with that place, is it not?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So
in fact, as we had when this group came into office, we've been looking at the possibilities of how we expand the garden as we got more people wanting to garden. And we have plans. We did not have the opportunity to share them yet because the issue hadn't come up. But yes, our first choice would be to stay where we are.
Then part B of that question is, if we get water there, putting aside our present weather patterns right now, if we got water there, that doesn't prevent in the future, considering, because we have to bring it from the other side of the road, it doesn't eliminate having a garden on the other side, but we can put that off and get water to your garden right away, can't we?
Yeah.
Okay.
We would love that, as a matter of fact, because we do have plans that whereas our garden could be expanded, and I think it would work very nicely. And we would love the opportunity to discuss that with some of the people on the board and see how we can progress along that line. Now, I haven't had the opportunity to discuss with Mark the difference between the numbers we were discussing before when we were starting to talk about it and the numbers now. But, you know, we don't want to move, if that's the question. We want to stay where we are, but we also, you know, we would have to have water, obviously. But I would also point out that even though this seems like a lot of money right now, I've got to say that over the years, and I think you all have to admit, you have not spent that much money on the community garden. And it seems sort of like it's unfortunate that we would like it all in the lump sum. But that, you know, that decision was not our choice. This was one that was forced on us, and we've had cheap water, so to speak, for a number of years. But we would as I said, if we had our choice right now, we would like the opportunity to have a task force and to thoroughly discuss this with Mark and with the board and come up with a plan that is going to work for all of us.
I have a question.
All right.
Do we know with certainty that the existing garden is on entirely Oakmont property and not on some part of Benson's property?
As far as I know, Herm, it is on, because I had, someone who has the actual measurements of the land and so forth would be better able to answer that accurately than me. But it is my understanding that our property line goes over to where the trees are. As you face the garden, there's an area over to the left that has the picnic table there and some trees. And the property line is supposedly just about the time where the trees are, from what we understand. And good, Kathy's agreeing with me. She's been here long enough to know.
Do you know if Mr. Benson has provided any survey data to show that we're not encroaching on his property?
His question is, do we know if Mr. Benson has any survey taken to make sure we're not encroaching? There were survey stakes there. And in fact that's another issue about possibly what we could do with our garden, because when this first started and I went out there and there was all kinds of dirt, I immediately called Cassie to find out what was going on, and he was excavating for the house and he was going to take the dirt, so I immediately said, hey, can we have the dirt, because this levels this area for a potential garden expansion. So Mark and I think are going to fight that out because of the bocce ball course.
Oh, no, we're okay.
Let me address both of those questions. I was the one that authorized the dirt to stay. I was the one that authorized the dirt to stay. And I was in a position where I had the authority to make that decision.
Yeah.
It made sense.
Absolutely.
Because if we did something with the garden and expanded, we needed the dirt. Otherwise, it sits there and it doesn't cost you anything. And it wasn't a problem. So that was
and it leveled
actually
that area.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, to get back to Herm's question, I don't have the papers in front of me, but I can say absolutely with complete assurity that we never would have built the garden without first finding out if it was on our own property. So I don't think that's even in question. What I would like to do is go back and explain why we are here at this point as far as the preliminary things we did. It was about 2 weeks ago, before it started raining, that we found out that, hey, the water's going away. And so I asked Mark a couple questions, and the first one is, what can we do? And I said, please get costs, because no matter what we decide, we're going to have a ballpark number of what it's going to cost to put a pipe under the street, period. And he went out and did that preliminary work. Why did we do that? Because we knew that we're going to be sitting here in a few weeks talking about it, and I didn't want to wait another couple weeks to get the numbers when we can get started early.
That's what I thought.
And secondly, this idea of, what if, I asked the question is, if these water meters are on the other side, could we put a garden over there? Yeah, we could. And there are political issues, which we fully recognize, and other issues. And you say, let's get the numbers for this and at least have something that we can start as a framework to compare. And I absolutely guarantee, and I speak for everybody here, that as we move through this process, you will be an integral part of deciding what we do, and giving us advice and all those kinds of things. It's absolutely open on the table. I'm thinking here to myself, what do I know about soil amenities? If we're going to do that, we'd get information from you and say, what do you need? We're not just going to go out and put in product X. So I just want to assure you that we are on your side. We're working together to come up with the best solution for everybody. And anything you heard today was based on preliminary work because we knew the questions are going to be asked, and we didn't want to waste time saying, well, we need to do this, when we already knew we had to, let's get it done.
Well, John, we appreciate that, and those of us on the board recognize that, here was a problem that you as a board is responsible for solving, and the fact that you were immediately jumping on it to at least start throwing out ideas to work with, and we appreciate that. I guess that really, as far as today, or to move forward, would a task force move it forward? Because we really, what we're concerned about is, we don't want to waste money, but we also want to, we have the months here that we could put in a new system in our present garden. Otherwise, in 3 or 4 months, we're going to be faced with our gardeners wanting to plant and garden and all that, and where's our water coming from? And it would be, I suspect, very expensive for us to haul in water or to have any place to store it. So that's part of the reason also that, and I assume that was what you also thought of in trying to think, hey, this is something we need to jump on.
We had that same discussion about what if we put a tank there and everybody, we had to fill the thing up once in a while till we get past this problem.
I think that both groups are looking at the same thing and trying to solve the same thing. But yes, I could go on and on about other things, but that's basically, where we are. And of course, also we recognize the fact that costs are in there, but we don't know what the other costs would be yet, and I suspect they'd be approximately the same.
Well, I propose that right here now we set up an ad hoc committee to work on this, work this out. Comment? Is it premature?
No. Any day that you delay is going to waste another day for a permit or a city or an estimate. To me, this is very clear. If you want to stay in that place, why don't you rely on us to install it for you? We will look at saving costs anywhere we can, but it needs to start and go in so it's ready to roll by May.
If we have that assurance from you, Cassie, and this board, I would accept that in New York in a second.
Cassie?
For us to stay there, where we are.
The issue is water has been removed from the present garden. Let's replace the water. Let's not build another city. Let's replace the water and get it going. Get some competitive bids. And
we're for that. Absolutely. I would be happy. I would walk out of here as happy as a clam. But I think all our gardeners will. Gail, do you want to add something? Gail is our head gardener.
Thank you, Pat. I'm Gail Capehart. I'm the current head gardener. I just want to make it real clear that come the 1st of April, can you hear me? Okay. Come April 1st, our gardeners are going to want to be putting seeds in. And it is impossible for most of our gardeners to haul water. So however we get this thing fixed, we may end up with needing a short-term solution and a long-term solution. So however it's done, we'll be happy, but come April 1st, we're going to be wanting to put seed in the ground.
I just wanted to interject something here. Use the mic, please. I just wanted to interject something here that might work. I'm not a gardener myself, but how about a well just above the garden? I mean, that wouldn't be as expensive as any of these other options.
The golf course is going to put in a well. It's going to be over $70,000.
Well,
yeah. But anyway, I'm not an expert there either, but I'd like to make a motion if I may. All right. I'd like to move that we get 3 competitive bids on moving water to the Oakmont Garden from across the street, and get those bids by the next board meeting in January, if possible, and take action at that time to replace the water supply at the garden.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we move ahead, get 3 bids to go onto the street and provide water to the existing garden. On the board, is there any further discussion? Folks out here, further discussion? Yeah. Wally?
I would not limit your bids to moving the water across the street only. You can still move it downhill on the same side of the street. I haven't heard any numbers on that yet.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I thought my idea was a harebrained idea, Wally. That I don't know if there's a water meter up on the hill there, and we can just bring it down the hill. Mark?
Mark's going to answer, but I could also answer, be the same answer.
There are no meters on that side of the street from the RV lot up to the house up on the hill on Meadow Ridge. So the only meters in that area are on the east side of the street right there. So
Could we, the houses up on the hill, we own the property all the way up to those houses. Can we have a meter put in on the south side of the street on the top of the hill and then run a pipe down the hill?
yeah, but we're looking at the same fees to go ahead and get into the street for the meter. A meter cannot cross a property line. So that's the issue. Each property has to have its own water meter.
Oh, I see. All the meters are on the other side of the street.
Each location has to have its own meter. So since there's a physical address for the community garden, the only way to get water there is to have its own water meter. So it can be billed from the city.
You're saying that we can't run just a line, an irrigation line from the meters across the street to the community garden?
That's something we looked at. I talked to Corey Hardy about that and the city, and they are very against that, pushing under the street because of the number of utilities that are under there. And because they want to go ahead, there are 2 meters on the east side of the street. As part of our property list that I went through earlier this month, there are 2 building lots on that side, and those 2 meters are dedicated or would be dedicated for those spaces. So we would still look at a meter on the south side, on the community garden side.
But can we move an irrigation line from the meters that exist now across? Is that legally possible?
It's possible. I don't know what the cost would be and the liability of pushing under the street with a line. They cut across the street. That I don't know. I assume the city would be against doing that, to tie a meter from one side of the street to the other. But I can certainly ask the question.
That's seems to me what needs to be
As I
answered.
recall, I think I'm off track here. That was one of the things that we found out, that just to get our permits and cut across the street, cut a trench, put pipe in, fill it backfill it, and resurface the street was going to be in the $30,000 range.
That's in the $30,000 range. That's correct.
And all that does is get you a meter to the other side of the street.
What's the estimate from?
The estimate is from 2 sources. The permitting estimates, well, they're not estimates. They're figures from the city. And the second ones are from Hardy, who's done a lot of construction here. We went to them and got a preliminary estimate of what it would cost, recognizing there's only one input. But we've worked with them in the past, and we didn't expect a final answer. That we need to get a ballpark figure to work from. Let's look at it this way. Let me go ahead. Let's say you found out that it was only going to cost $5,000 to cross the street, and it was going to cost $30,000 to move the garden and tie into the water. Well, you wouldn't have to think about that too long. But when they're about the same, then you have to start to balance off one versus the other. And there are a lot of implications both ways. And we're just trying to get a heads up and some preliminary numbers so we can think about this logically. We have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded that we go out and get 3 bids to find out what it was now. To bring the water to the garden. The existing one. So I call the question. All in favor? Opposed? There we go.
And to address
Off and running.
The property line, Benson did do survey markers, and that is his own property. When I did the survey for all 20 properties that OVA owns, that is clearly on one of the properties that on the tax rolls for OVA.
Thank you all for your participation in this. Okay, next items. Do we have any items for the future board meeting agenda recommendations?
3 bids for the community garden. Have 3 bids for the community garden.
Yes, that's on there. Okay. And I guess our taskmaster, I think that pretty much covered what we had too, is it not? Yeah. That'll be brought up next month. Yeah.
It will be on the agenda.
Entertain a motion for adjournment?
To executive.
Yes, we're going to an exit for this meeting. Pardon me?
I had a
Has been moved.
second.
Seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Oh, okay, you're in favor. Remind the board meeting members that we have to go back and reconvene our executive session because we didn't get finished. Thank you all for being here today and have a happy holiday.